felt good to say. All right, so tonight's topic is based on this idea that I have that's probably just totally wrong, that what Napoleon did in 1798 had a massive impact on the way the Middle East unfolded afterwards. In other words, that 1798 is this really important key moment. So what I'm going to do before we talk about what Napoleon does in 1798 is I want to set us up, because, well, that's what I always do. So in 1798, Napoleon invades Egypt. He invades Egypt and he attacks the Syrian province of the Ottoman Empire, which involved going through Palestine and actually invading southern Lebanon. The reason why that moment is so important is because, in a way, it's the fulfillment of a goal that had been centuries in the making. Well, temporary fulfillment. He's defeated in 1801, so it only lasts 3 years. But there's a goal that had been sort of building up to that moment. So to figure that out, I want to go all the way back to 639. In 639, Amr ibn al-As takes 3,000 men into Egypt. It belonged to the Roman Empire. It had belonged to the Roman Empire since 31 BC. Augustus Caesar had taken Egypt over. For those of you, I'll do a lecture on this at some point, but just to be clear, just to make sure I have you on the same page, Cleopatra VII had a love affair with Marcus Antonius. Marcus Antonius and Cleopatra came up with this idea that Egypt would effectively be merged with the Roman Republic, and there would be a sort of a Romano-Egyptian empire built. Augustus Caesar had a different idea. It was that he was going to be the emperor, right? Because Rome was still a republic. He's destroying the republic once and for all and replacing it with an empire. That he was going to be the emperor, and it was going to be a Roman empire, and the Egyptians were going to be subjects underneath Roman feet. They were going to be a servant class. The reason why Rome wanted Egypt so badly was because Egypt produced so much food. Egypt produced more food than the entire rest of the Roman Empire combined. Egypt accounted for something like 60% of all the calories produced for the Roman Empire. If you're marching legions off to conquer this or hold that, food's really, really important. There were two other reasons. Egypt had the Great Library, so it was a place to generate tech. And 4,500 years ago, the ancient Egyptians dug a canal from the Nile all the way to the Gulf of Suez. So if you were in a ship in Italy and you sailed up the Nile to right about where Cairo is, you caught that canal, you'd come out in the Red Sea. And you could go to India, you could go to China. I know you all think the Suez Canal was built from 1859 to 1869. It was, but the ancient Egyptians beat the French by 4,500 years and had already done it. So that's why the Romans wanted this. So when Amr invades Egypt in 639, it's a potential catastrophe for the Romans. This is, in a way, the end of the Roman Empire. Egypt was a major piece of the empire. Heraclius, the emperor at the time of the invasion, captured the Roman Empire. He and his father launched a rebellion, and the first thing they took was Egypt. And then from Egypt, they went and captured Constantinople, and he became the emperor. So in a way, having this Arab army invade is hitting at the core of who he is, but he's already lost a bunch of battles, right? Yarmouk was 3 years earlier. And so he's become accustomed to defeat at this point. In any case, 3,000 Arab soldiers aren't sufficient to capture Egypt. There's no way that's going to happen, and yet it does. So it's one of those events. Now, it's true that the 3,000 men had very, very good support from the Egyptian public. The Coptic community hated the Roman Empire. When the Arabs invaded, the Copts came to them and said, "There are hundreds of thousands of us. We're ready to volunteer and help you in any way we can." And they basically, the Copts did logistics and moved supplies around while the 3,000 men fought the Romans. Took 3 years. Egypt is no longer in the Roman Empire. Constans II made an attempt, the Roman emperor, to retake Egypt in 645. So 3 years after Egypt falls, the Romans arrive, they capture Alexandria, and they held it for a year. And then are defeated a second time in 646. There's this huge gap where Europeans don't make an attempt to capture Egypt again until the Crusades. Amalric, the king of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, invaded Egypt in 1163. So it's 500 years later. He invades Egypt, and then he loses. And he'll do it 4 more times. He invaded Egypt 5 times over the course of 6 years, from 1163 to 1169, and he's defeated 5 times. The 5th time, the Roman Empire sent soldiers and a fleet to assist him, and they still lose. They try to capture Damietta, they fail, and they're defeated and they're driven out of Egypt. They're not done though. So in 1201, a group of crusaders went to Venice. And they tell the Doge of Venice, his name is Enrico Dandolo. In 1201, he's like 91 years old, so he's old enough to be president of the United States. He was blind, and they tell him, we want to do another crusade. We want to try to recapture Jerusalem, right? Because Jerusalem was recaptured by the Arabs in 1187. So in 1201, they're dreaming, how do we get it back? And what they conclude is that Amalric was right. If you don't own Egypt, there's no possibility of another crusade succeeding. So in other words, you've got to go to Egypt. And the Venetians are like, look, Egypt's our number 1 trading partner. We're umbilically linked to Egypt. We love Egypt. We are not willing to do this unless there's a possibility of your success, because if you sour our relationship with Egypt, you wreck the Venetian Republic. We can't function without Egypt. And of course, the Crusaders are like, you've been told by the Pope you can't trade with Muslims. And the Venetians are like, yeah, we don't. We trade with the Copts. Of course we're not trading with the Muslims. Egypt produces pork. Where do you think we get it from? We can't grow pork in Venice. It's a lagoon. We can grow mosquitoes here. So they come up with what has to be the most insane naval military adventure of its time. They build hundreds of ships just to do this. The Venetians were producing a ship per day. Like they are dedicated to this. The Crusaders have spent a crazy amount of money. Well, they didn't have it, so they borrowed it from the Venetians to do this expedition. So I'm not going to go into the finer details of this because it will be a lecture later. But I just want to give you the gist of what happens. The fleet leaves, and it doesn't make it to Egypt. Because Enrico Dandolo has a better idea. He sacks Constantinople. He sacks the capital of the Roman Empire, and then doesn't leave. He stays. He dies in 1205 in Constantinople. They put up a puppet emperor and then run the Roman Empire, but from Venice. And they pillaged, looted the city, and brought so much of its wealth back to Venice. It became this massive surge of wealth in Venice. And anyway, so it doesn't work. The Fourth Crusade doesn't make it to Egypt. But the Crusaders are stubborn. This is the cool thing about fundamentalists. They don't want to give up. And they'll keep coming over and over and over again. So they are going to launch the Seventh Crusade. The Seventh Crusade leaves Europe in 1248 to head to Egypt. They captured Damietta. So they did it, finally, multiple tries. They get the city. Again, long story short, because I'm going to do a lecture on this, so we go into the finer details at a later date. But the Mamluk, well, it depends on when you start the Mamluk rulership of Egypt. As-Salih is the last Ayyubid sultan of Egypt. He dies during the siege, and the Mamluk take over in the aftermath. Shajar ad-Dur actually runs Egypt for about 160 days. So Egypt had a woman ruler. She was not technically a Mamluk because she wasn't a Mamluk, but she had been a slave at one point. And then she became the ruler of Egypt. And then she gets replaced by slave after slave after slave. Right? Saif ad-Din Qutuz was a slave. Baybars was a slave. It was the reign of slaves. In any case, the Seventh Crusade launches a campaign outside of Mansoura. It's led by King Louis IX, the French king. And they get to Mansoura, and the Egyptians defeat them. And that's the end of the Seventh Crusade. So they didn't succeed in doing much. They capture Louis IX, and then they ransom him with the promise that he'll end the crusade. He goes, sure, of course. And then he spends 4 years trying to figure out how to capture Egypt. He stays in Palestine, and eventually he just gives up and goes back to France. And that's that. So in other words, there's this seed that's been planted in the European mind that you got to get Egypt. Egypt's the key to, I guess, having Palestine. So that's the step. All right. They're not going to make another try for it until 1798 when Napoleon does it. Here's why. So there is a state, I've talked about this in more detail in a different lecture, so I'm not going to go into all the details. There's a little itty-bitty Turkish state in what is today northwest Turkey, Anatolia at the time, and that state is going to be ruled by the Ottomans. They start carving out, it's majority Greek, it's majority Christian, the Muslim Turks are a minority in their own state. They've carved it out of the Roman Empire, and they're little by little grabbing the neighborhood, fighting other Turks, fighting the Romans, expanding. And then Timur shows up, Timur-Lenk, and he tears the Ottomans up a while, subjugates them, and then turns around on his rampage, his psychotic, malevolent rampage through the Middle East where he slaughters hundreds of thousands of people, and we still don't know why. And then the Ottomans get their independence from the Timurids, and they start to rebuild their state. They capture Edirne before Timur shows up, Adrianopolis. And they made it their second capital, so they had Bursa and then Edirne. We don't really know the year they captured Edirne, so I'm just going to throw a year out. And it's sometime around 1367, give or take 8 years. That's the best I can do. They make it their second capital. And then, just a little bit later, 1453, they capture Constantinopolis. Their goal in capturing Constantinopolis, their goal all along wasn't to destroy the Roman Empire. It was to create a Muslim Roman Empire. That's why they wanted Constantinia so badly, because they wanted the Roman capital to be the capital of their version of the Roman Empire. So that's 1453. From that point on, the Ottoman Empire expands very rapidly. In 1517, they absorb Egypt. They absorb the Mamluk. This just 60 years later. At that point, they've conquered a big chunk of the Balkans, and they've conquered Syria, and now they've captured Egypt by 1517. They had become, by 1517, the global superpower. I'm saying the because there's China, but China wasn't exerting itself, and China had too many internal problems. The Ottoman Empire was exerting itself. It was growing. It was becoming increasingly more powerful every day. Then, 12 years later, so 1529, Suleiman the Magnificent takes the Ottoman army to Vienna and puts it under siege. He fails to capture it, but then 12 years later, in 1541, he goes to Budapest and he captures Budapest. The Hungarians had been giving the Ottoman Empire all sorts of fits. They had constantly fighting them, even before they captured Constantinople. And so at this point, right, it's over. Budapest is now under Ottoman rule. It was a devastating blow for the Europeans, even though Vienna hadn't fallen. And by this point, it became clear to everybody that the Ottoman Empire, as the preeminent superpower, was not something you could defeat in an offensive adventure. The best you could do is defend and hope that you would somehow pull it off like Vienna had done. Right? Vienna, really, when you think about it, if the Ottomans had captured Vienna in 1529, I probably wouldn't be giving you this lecture in English right now. So, the Europeans changed their approach to the Middle East, and instead of trying to figure out how to capture Egypt, their goal is how do we not lose Austria? Except for Venice. Beginning in the 1400s and going all the way until the end of the Venetian Republic in the 1700s, so for about a 300-year span of time, Venice does 7 wars against the Ottoman Empire. So, and you got to remember, Venice is this big, Ottoman Empire is this big, so it was like a mosquito buzzing around, zapping the Ottomans, and the Ottomans kept trying to smack it, couldn't quite get it. So, 7 wars. In one of those, the fourth one, in the year 1571, the Venetians had talked the Spanish and the Genoese. So the Genoese were the arch enemy of the Venetians. So this is an amazing thing to have talked them into doing this, into sinking the Ottoman navy. And they fight the Battle of Lepanto and sink the Ottoman navy. The Ottoman Empire was so powerful, its navy could be sunk, and it could still be the number 1 superpower on the planet. In fact, it was so powerful, even though its navy was sunk in 1571, in 1683, it put Vienna under siege again. This time, they came this close to capturing Vienna. The first time it wasn't as close. In fact, Vienna was finished. They knew there was no saving the city. And then John III showed up. John III was the king of Poland. He had with him 18,000 cavalrymen. He just brought horsemen. They raced the whole way to Vienna. So they start in Poland and Germany, and they're just riding as fast as they can to save the city. 3,000 of them were Polish hussars. They had wings on their backs. Big wings. So they looked like angels swooping in. And the 18,000 attacked the Ottoman army. And even though the Ottoman army had amazing soldiers, they simply weren't prepared for an onslaught like this. And they're driven from the field. And that's why Vienna doesn't fall a second time. I'm going to ruin a story for you that you love, because it's who I am. John III is King Theoden. The 18,000 cavalry are the Rohirrim. Minas Tirith is Vienna. Osgiliath is Budapest. You see it now. And no, the Ottomans didn't have elephants. Well, Oliphants. But it does mean Constantinople is Mordor. I don't know who Saruman is in this story. Anyway, it was probably all the Christians that were fighting alongside the Ottoman army. Because we have this thing that we do in our stupid world today where we divide everything into categories. And it's Christians versus Muslims. There were Christians on the Muslim side, so no. And then we make it, well, Turks versus Europeans. There were Europeans on the Turkish side, so no. In fact, here's a little secret. If you're Turkish and you're a Turkish nationalist, definitely don't do 23andMe. Because you're going to find out you're Bulgarian and Armenian and Kurdish and Arab and Iranian and Greek and everything else. because the Turks had an open society and they married into the locals. They didn't slaughter them and genocide them. And in fact, the Ottoman sultans, their harems, were an international organization, international and multi-religious. Like, nobody was forced to convert. There was no compulsion, according to the Ottoman state. You can't force people to convert. That's awful, because then God would know you were not doing it as a genuine act. Anyway, so why did the Ottoman Empire come apart then, if it was this powerful? Oh, by the way, I made Budapest Osgiliath 3 years after John III drives the Ottomans from Vienna. Europeans capture, the Archduchy of Austria captures Budapest from the Ottoman Empire, freeing Osgiliath. See how it's still Lord of the Rings? Now I ruined it for you all. Isn't that cool, though, that there is this story made that's so compelling? I love the story. And then you start to think about how Orientalist and filled with racist, anti-Muslim hatred it really is. It's like, oh, darn it, the hobbits are so cute. Oh, well, I guess we should write our own stories. So, the Ottoman Empire does start to finally come apart. Not until after it got all the way to Algeria, right? It even vassalized Morocco. It didn't conquer Morocco, but it made Morocco a subservient state. It conquered Algeria. So it owned a big piece of the Arabian Peninsula, including the Hejaz Mountains. It owned everything from Algeria to Iraq, and it went all the way to Hungary, right? It was this, it even went into Ukraine. At one point, it actually went all the way around the Black Sea. So they had completely encircled the Black Sea, either with direct control of the land or client states. And so the Ottoman Empire had become this amazing empire. And then it starts to come apart. And here's why. There were two forces pulling inside the empire. One force was led by the sultans and his harem, because his harem was actually his cabinet. There was a whole Turkish bureaucracy with professional politicians and professional bureaucrats, technocrats, and they, with the cabinet, the Sultan's harem, his advisors, and the Sultan were making decisions, and their goal always was to advance, to innovate, to create new technology, to adopt new technology, to modernize, to build infrastructure. When we're talking about the Ottoman Empire in 1453, it was 100 years ahead of Europe in every technological way. Maybe more, 150 years. I mean, right, Paris still didn't have sewage systems. The street was your sewer. That's also where your chickens and your pigs were, and where you walked. But in the Middle East, there were sewers, and that's just one example of so many. The army was conservative. The army didn't like all this modernity and change. The army felt it eroded Turkish culture, it eroded Islam, and as a result, the army would periodically either pull the power away from the Sultan or just do a coup d'etat and replace the Sultan. And as a result, the army intentionally kept the Ottoman Empire from technologically advancing, so that by the time we get to 1683, the Europeans have caught up. And the Ottoman Empire had thrown away its advantage because it was clinging to an old, imaginary way of life. This is one of the problems that every society has to deal with. We imagine there was some perfect moment in our past that we need to get back to. There never was such a thing. All moments in the past are messy and awkward and flawed. And by the way, mostly sucked, if for no other reason they didn't have antibiotics. Like, you're imagining a time and thinking it's so great when the life expectancy was 40? What? Now, don't get me wrong, I feel like at some level we've circused and breaded ourselves by eating high salt, high sugar, high fatty foods and watching lots of great TV and playing video games and spending all our time on our screen doom scrolling. And that has its own nasty, ugly side to it. So I'm not saying this time period's any better. I think they all suck. That's what all this history has taught me. Is we're all, and everybody's an idiot and everybody's flawed. We're all doing the best we can. No culture is better than the next. That's what history has taught me. And everybody gets their day in the sun, and everybody goes through a dark ages. And it sucks when you're in the dark ages. It's not good. Don't do it if you're thinking about it. There's at least several states on the planet right now trying to figure out how to go into their own dark ages. And I just wish I could warn, just read some history, dude. It's not a big deal. Just a couple of books and you'd be like, oh yeah, this isn't as cool as it sounded. First of all, you have to blot out the sun. Right, because it's dark. No? Okay, that one failed. So, we fast forward back to Napoleon. Napoleon has just inherited the French Revolution. And through his brilliant political maneuvering, has basically kidnapped the French state. He's captured it. By the way, he destroys the most serene Republic of Venice in 1797. Anyway, so 1 year before he does the Egypt thing, he takes out Venice. He has a problem, though. He can't contain the revolution. Nobody can. It's actually the reason he's in power, is the French, after having done the revolution, can't get the French to stop revolting. Like, they won. They've killed everybody they need to, and more. Like, at this point, they're like, I don't even know if you're guilty. Come, the guillotine's hungry. And they're feeding the machine, and everybody's like, no, we won. It's good. Right, the French, look, I know there's a lot of anti-French stuff out there in the universe, and I sometimes indulge because it's fun. Like when you imitate French people smoking. Anyway, but when the French do a revolution, you've never seen anything like it. It is a work of art. They changed everything. They even at one point banned the Catholic Church. Like, can you imagine? They turned the churches into temples for philosophy and politics. And the idea is people would go to those churches because they realized they were beautiful works of art. So why destroy them? And then you could debate how to make France a better place going forward. They changed the artwork. They switched to metric. First country on earth to do that. They realized how cool zeros were, as opposed to 5,280. Like, what was the moment when how long should a mile be? Well, let's see, 1, 2, 3. And then they got to like 5,280 and they go, I can't count anymore. This is it. I'm done. This is boring. I think that's what happened. That's the hypothesis I'm going to go with. So when Napoleon takes over, he needs to vent, like a pressure cooker. He needs to vent some of this revolutionary fury. And he does it through warfare. So that's one of the reasons he does the Egypt expedition. But I think there's a few more reasons. One of them is he's fulfilling this crusader dream. He's going to do what Louis IX couldn't do, what King Amalric couldn't do. He's going to fulfill it. Another reason, he wants to build a massive French empire. He wants to recover from the 7 Years' War, which, by the way, went from 1754 to 1763. Do the math. The 7 Years' War took Canada from the French, right? It took New France from the French. It was a catastrophic defeat for the French Empire. And so at some level, he's trying to figure out how to recover. One of the things he wants to do, for example, is take the western half of the Louisiana Territory from Spain. And he actually does, and then does a really stupid thing in Haiti that I've already talked about, and then sells the western half of Louisiana territory to the United States for a few bucks. But his goal is to recreate this empire, and he's thinking if he can capture Egypt and get a hold of its amazing trade position between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea and its food production, and then possibly even grab Jerusalem for himself, like this puts him on a path to glory. Because of course he's a narcissist, and the only thing he cares about is his own self-aggrandizement. He's going to build an Arc de Triomphe and march his troops underneath it. Right? He's that guy. So he invades, and the Ottomans crumble. The French take Egypt, and then they go into Palestine, and the Ottomans are having the hardest time holding on, and then the British intervene. And the British come in on the Ottoman side, and in the same year he invades, 1798, there's the Battle of the Nile, and the French fleet is sunk. And then the English tell the Ottomans, we'll transport you to Alexandria, and you can retake the city. So in 1799, the Ottoman army on English ships come up to Alexandria, and they're at Abukir, and they set up a defensive line. They're going to actually set up two defensive lines, one behind the other, because they're trying to avoid the typical European tactics of the time. The Ottomans are falling apart. They're the only ones who know it. Well, now Napoleon does. And then the British are like, wait, what the heck? Is it this easy? They're starting to do the math. And then they start calling the Ottoman Empire the old man in Europe, which is really weird, right? Because the Ottoman Empire, if you do Edirne as the capital, it probably became the capital in like 1412-ish, and then Bursa became the secondary capital at that point. Do Constantinia and do 1453. Then England was 927. England's the old man in Europe. France, depends on whether you do Charlemagne making Western Franconia as your demarcation, that'd be 9th century, or whether you do the official founding of France, which is 10th century. So France is either the oldest or the second oldest European state. The Ottoman Empire is new in comparison. But the English are starting to look at this going, wait a minute. If we hadn't intervened, you guys might have been defeated. And in fact, at Alexandria, they see it firsthand. The French general, Murat, is looking at the Turks as they're deploying, and he realizes if he lets them finish deploying, they'll be in a strong position because he sees what they're doing. He figures it out. And he goes, I got to go now. And he attacks, and they manage to punch a hole through the front line, but they can't get through the secondary line. The Turks actually push them back, and then Murat sees a hole in the Turkish line, and he takes his cavalry and he brings them. Why isn't it Napoleon, you're asking? It's a good question. He snuck out of Egypt already. He's on his way to France. He's on a ship. After the English sank the French fleet in the Nile, Napoleon's like, I need to get back to France. Things are going very badly in France right now. So he leaves Murat in charge, and he's going to manage this battle. He launches a cavalry attack through this hole. They bust through the second line. They actually make it to the Turkish camp. And the Turkish commander is Mustafa Pasha. He is the uncle of Muhammad Ali. He's coming into the story later. And Murat actually ends up in his tent. And they're fighting with pistols and swords. And Murat gets cut across the face. And I forget, he injures Mustafa Pasha. Like the two commanders have injured each other. And then they go into surgery and survive the event. And Mustafa Pasha is taken as a prisoner. And the Turkish army at that point breaks. There's nowhere to run to. The French have them cut off. All there is the Mediterranean Sea. So the Ottoman soldiers jump into the water to try to swim to the British fleet, which is 3 kilometers away. I don't know what your swimming skills are like, but I'm pretty sure I can't swim 3 kilometers in water that's moving. I'm pretty sure I can't swim 3 kilometers in a swimming pool either. Pretty sure that would kill most people. According to the French, 11,000 Ottoman soldiers drowned trying to swim to the British fleet. That's not true, probably. The British say that they rescued about 3,000. So 3,000 men make it to the British fleet. But for the record, one of those men is Muhammad Ali. So Muhammad Ali wasn't Turkish, he was Albanian. And the Turks put him in charge in 1801 of actually recapturing Egypt. He leads the Ottoman army into Egypt in 1801, and the French surrender. And that's the end of Napoleon's campaign. It lasted 3 years. Muhammad Ali goes, I can't believe how weak the Ottoman Empire is. I think I want Egypt for myself. And so, for the next 4 years, he begins to build a bureaucracy so that he can put himself into a position where he can effectively pull Egypt out of the Ottoman Empire. So the French, the British, and an Albanian have figured out that the Ottoman Empire is in serious trouble. And he pulls it off. And it, in fact, ultimately, eventually, there becomes a dispute between the Ottoman Empire and Muhammad Ali, and he solves it by invading the Ottoman Empire, and he leads an army through Palestine, through Syria, and into what is today Turkey. When the Ottomans come to him and they're like, we surrender, how do we work this out? We're done. And now everybody is looking at the Ottoman Empire thinking, oh, this isn't the same superpower that we imagined it was. Look at what Muhammad Ali just pulled off. By the way, he will launch Egypt into a modernization program that included Egypt deciding upon empire. And Egypt conquers the Hejaz Mountains and Palestine from the Ottoman Empire. This is ours now, thank you. Conquer the Sudan, all of it. The modern state of the Sudan was created in the 19th century by Egyptian colonial ambitions. In fact, the Egyptians got all the way into northern Uganda. So they didn't just do the Sudan, they actually got all the way to Uganda. The Egyptians set up colonies in Eritrea and Somalia, and then lost it all. But isn't that amazing? 19th century, you didn't know that about Egypt and its attempt to do what Europe was doing. But that's why there's a Sudan. So if you've ever asked yourself the question, why did the Sudan ended up with this civil war? It was Egypt's construction, 19th century colonial borders. All right, the next important moment, because now we got the English thinking. So for the record, Europeans had managed to carve off a chunk of Arab or Muslim land. They had done it in Morocco. The Portuguese had taken and built a series of ports along the north coast and the west coast. So if you ever go to Morocco and you go to Essaouira, Essaouira was founded by the Portuguese. It's a Portuguese fort that was designed to help them get to India. The Portuguese lose those colonies because the Spanish take them. So that's why Ceuta and Melilla, and there's a third one, I don't remember what it's called. That's why those are Spanish, not Portuguese today, because the Spanish replaced the Portuguese. But other than that, except for Indonesia, of course, because the Dutch are getting into Indonesia, and the Portuguese. The Portuguese went in first, and then the Dutch replaced them. Other than that, in the Middle East and North Africa, the Europeans hadn't messed with the Muslim world because they hadn't in their mind, this is that Ottoman state, you can't get in. But in the meantime, they've conquered North and South America. And they've taken almost the entire African coast. south of the Sahara. They didn't go inland until late in the 1800s, but they had gone all along the coast, setting up outposts for the French, the British, the Portuguese, even the Spanish, right? Spanish Equatorial Guinea was a colony in Africa at one point. There's still a remnant of it. It's called Equatorial Guinea, but it's not the full size. The Portuguese had grabbed pieces of India, but just the coast, and the English grabbed the coast of India, but they don't go into the interior yet. They don't have the technology. They don't have the ability to do it. The Portuguese and the Dutch are now in Indonesia, and the Portuguese grab Macau, the city in China. So in their mind, they're the global powers. They rule the world. Their fleets go everywhere. They can point in a direction, and that thing is theirs. So for them not to go into the Middle East and North Africa was because they had to overcome their thing with this idea that the Ottoman Empire couldn't be defeated. In 1820, the British decide to test this. Here. And they approach what will eventually become the United Arab Emirates. They approach the Emirates, the various emirs, and they go, we're done with your piracy. So let me back the clock up a little bit, because I really should have mentioned something before then that'll make the piracy thing make more sense. For the record, what the British called piracy probably did include some piracy. It was mostly just trade with India. But in the mind of the British, India belonged to them, so having an outsider trading was piracy. But anyway, I need to back it up. So before the French surrender in Egypt, it's still 1801, something really bizarre happens. Like really bizarre. The United States, this brand new state that doesn't even control what's in its territory, right? More than half of the United States in 1801 belongs to Native Americans. The United States hadn't yet successfully genocided and subjugated and destroyed those populations in their settler colonial project. So something like 60% of the United States still belongs to the American Indian population. The United States decides it's going to do its first real international military adventure. What happened was a group of Moroccan pirates had captured an American ship and taken it to Morocco and then sent a communique to the United States saying, we want a ransom for the crew and the ship and the goods. We'll give it all back to you. You just need to pay us. Every European state told the United States, yeah, just pay. We just pay. It's no big deal. It's a nuisance, but we just pay. The United States decides, Thomas Jefferson decides, the third president, I'm going to fight. And he throws down, and he sends 20 ships to the Mediterranean, 9 Marines, and the 9 Marines were accompanied by 3 midshipmen. So there's 12 guys that aren't going to be part of the 20 ships. When they get to the Mediterranean, there are already 3 ships fighting, the Barbary pirates, from Sweden. So there were 23 ships, because the United States and Sweden did this together. Sweden peaced out before the United States did, which of course really annoyed the United States. The first place they land is Morocco, and the Moroccans greet them with hugs, and of course kissing on each cheek. And at some level, the Americans are like, what? What's happening? And Morocco goes, we need to remind you, we're the first ever country to recognize the independence of the United States of America. We did it in 1777 before France, the Netherlands. Nobody else had done it yet. And then at that point, the Americans are like, wait, but you just took some of our guys hostage. It's just business. Pay the ransom and we let them go. And Jefferson's negotiators said, no, we don't want to pay this ransom. We don't do that. And Morocco goes, okay, we'll make you a deal. Since we're such good friends, and we've recognized your existence for 24 years now, and you're a baby, we come from thousands of year-old civilization. We'll make you a deal. You pay the ransom this one time, and we won't attack American ships going forward. just a one-off. And Jefferson's negotiators go, oh, okay, and they pay. And then they decide, okay, now let's go teach Tripoli a lesson. So some of you are asking, which one? Libya, not Lebanon. That one. So they set up a naval blockade outside of Tripoli. And as this blockade is dragging on for months into years, this campaign lasts 4 years. As it's dragging on into years, one of the US ships, the USS Philadelphia, hits a sandbar and runs aground. And the Tripoli pirates swarm the ship, capture the crew, bring them ashore, and then send out a notification that there's a ransom for them. And of course, the whole reason the United States is here is to not have to pay ransom to Barbary pirates. So it's hilarious. US sailors managed to get on the ship and set it on fire. So they wanted to refloat it, but they were catching too much gunfire from the Barbary pirates, so they just set it on fire and escape. By 1805, remember those 9 Marines? They're the first ever Marines. This is the birth of the United States Marine Corps. Thomas Jefferson created them for this operation, and they just stuck around forever. They go to Greece and Egypt, and I think they also went to Palestine and Syria, and hired 500 Greek and Arab mercenaries. They bring them to Alexandria. They march along the coast into Libya until they get to Derna, which is in eastern Libya, and they captured Derna in 1805. And at that point, they're thinking, now let's negotiate. And here's the deal they made. They paid the ransom for the sailors that were captured. That's it. That was the deal. One of the funniest things in my mind when I read history is when you read U.S. accounts of this, they go, and this was a U.S. victory. Wait a minute. You were only in trouble because you tried to do something when there probably wasn't a problem, and you ended up doing the thing you were trying not to do because you ran a ship, right? They created a problem and then solved it and called it a win. I'm not sure I understand. I buy a house. I pay $2 million for it. It gets assessed at $1 million. In a fit of anger, I set it on fire. Then I feel bad about it, and I build a new house. And then I say, it's a victory. And it's probably a terrible analogy, but I feel like it's still close to the level of nonsense. For the record, that's the First Barbary Pirate War. The second one is in 1815, after the British are done burning Washington, D.C. to the ground. We almost immediately launch a second attack on North Africa, and the United States does win that one and gets a good deal. The Barbary pirates will leave U.S. ships alone. That was the deal. And a saber. So if you've ever seen the Marine Corps in their dress uniform, they have a straight-edged saber that was given to them as a gift from one of the Barbary pirates. It's a replica, right, obviously, that everybody has. And then, of course, people are like, wait a minute, it's not curved. The Turks and the Persians used curved blades. The Arabs used straight blades. And the Indians used both. So if you've ever wondered, the Turks and I'll say it again, the Turks and the Persians used curved blades, the Arabs used straight blades. Look at the Saudi flag, it's a straight blade. For daggers, you have a curved blade, but for a sword, you have a straight blade. It's because somebody's going to go, oh, what about the daggers? Sure, the daggers have I'm sorry, I forgot daggers. Let it go. All right, so that's the Barbary pirate thing. So now we're going to go to 1820. When the English show up here, they've been emboldened by the United States' success in 1815. And they're thinking, we got to push these Arabs who are trading with India out of the marketplace, and they make the emirs sign a deal. And then in 1853, they make them sign another deal, which says that the English will stay permanently in the region. I guess permanently meant 1971. I didn't know that. I find that happens a lot. Anyway. In 1837, the United States forced the Cherokee to sign a deal called the Treaty of New Echota, and it gave them a chunk of Oklahoma for all eternity. It turned out eternity ended in 1920. It was a shock to everyone. Eternity, permanent. It's fascinating. 1830, the Algerians are going to get a surprise. The French invade. Their excuse, of course, is to tame piracy, but that's not the French goal. The French have decided they're going to do to Algeria what the United States did to North America. They're going to subjugate, crush, colonize Algeria, Francicize it, whatever it takes. They want Algeria to become a permanent part of France, as inherent as the other land they stole, like Corsica and Savoy and Provence and Alsace-Lorraine and Bretagne, and that little piece of Aragon that they took, Roussillon, all of that's stolen. And so they were going to take another chunk, which is Algeria. So that's 1830. In 1859, the French decide they're going to build the Suez Canal. So what happened was the Arab rulers of Egypt had allowed it wasn't the Suez Canal, but the canal that went from the Nile to the Gulf of Suez to go into disrepair. By the way, it's still there. If you're ever in North Cairo and you're driving and you see a canal in the northern edge of Cairo, if you were to follow that thing, it goes all the way to Suez. It goes all the way to the Suez Canal. It's used for agricultural purposes today. You can just look it up on Google Maps. You can see it. That's a 4,500-year-old canal. By the way, Lake Fayoum, the ancient Egyptians did the survey for it, and they realized it was below the Nile, so they made that lake. It's a human-made lake. They redirected a chunk of the Nile. I swear they did it on purpose so that Egypt would look like a flower, right? The delta is the flower, and then Fayoum is a leaf, and the Nile is a stem. They were looking at the map going, oh, this would be really cool looking from outer space. And also for agricultural purposes, because that allowed them to then farm the Fayoum area. But I like the other one better. The other explanation's better. So in 1859, the French want to replace that canal that's gone into disrepair and really hasn't been used for centuries at that point. But they come up with a different plan. They're going, instead of running a canal from the Nile, which will silt up and therefore require constant maintenance, they want to just cut a north-south line separating Egypt from the Sinai. It takes 10 years, and it's not really a French project when you think about it. 1.5 million Egyptians dug that canal. It was an Egyptian project that the French financed. In the beginning, Egyptians heard about the project and went, oh, this would be an opportunity for me to make money. And then as people started not returning because they were dying, there were cholera epidemics, there were slave-like work conditions. It was a brutal event. Egyptians began to hear the rumors and realized, oh, we don't want to be a part of this, and started to reject going. And so the French came up with tricks. They would say, no, we're working on a different project, and it's a different place, and then they would take the Egyptians to the canal and then make them work as slaves. Around 100,000 Egyptians die building that canal over the course of the 10 years. 1.5 million Egyptians worked on that canal. And then France charged Egypt for it. And Egypt couldn't afford it, so to make the payments, it had to take out loans. And the Egyptians were smart enough to know not to take out all the loans from France, because the French bankers showed up. They're like, would you like some loans? And the Egyptians went, we're also going to talk to the English. Except that turned out to be a mistake. So, in 1879, a group of Egyptians in the army decide, led by a man named Urabi, decide to revolt. The reason they're revolting is because so when Muhammad Ali created the Egyptian state in started the work in 1801, he put up signs across Egypt. And it said simply, if in Arabic, by the way, he didn't speak Arabic. He spoke Turkish and Albanian. So, but he had people who spoke Arabic in his army write, if you can read this sign, come apply for a job in the government. Well, the population of people who could read the sign were Coptic Orthodox Egyptians. They were the most literate people. And as a result, that bureaucracy was overwhelmingly Christian. So this Muslim Albanian ruling Egypt on his own, but on paper it was still part of the Ottoman Empire, had a largely Christian bureaucracy. It wasn't entirely Christian, but largely Christian bureaucracy. But his men weren't from that. They were Circassians and Turks. So the Egyptian population, the Muslim Egyptian population, felt like they were outsiders in their own country. They had no control over the government. They weren't really part of the bureaucracy. They weren't part of the military. Egypt at the time was probably about 25% Christian, 75% Muslim. So it wasn't like the Christians were a tiny minority in the country or anything, but it just felt like they felt like outsiders. And so Arabi leads this revolt, not really against the Coptic population, but really against the Turkish and Circassian population and the kind of control that they had. Oh, I forgot another thing I should throw into this story. I'll go back to it. It's important. And in any case, I'll finish this one first. The British used this as the perfect opportunity. In 1882, the British invade Egypt, saying that Egypt was about to default on its loans, and it was trying to secure the loans that it took to build the Suez Canal, and then, as a result, took Egypt into the empire. The British really wanted Egypt because that canal the French built, well, the Egyptians built, but there were French engineers supervising with whips. That canal that the French whipped into construction allowed the British to go from England to India really fast. And of course, for the British, everything revolved around India. One of the reasons why the British let the United States become independent was the British went, we're going to make a crazy amount of money in the United States. We'll make that part of their surrender treaty. They'll still be part of the empire for economic purposes. But the real gem on the planet is India. When the British began conquering India, it was 24% of the world's GDP. When the British left, it was 4% of the world's GDP. That's what you call plundering. I was in a conversation with a South Asian last year, or the year before, I don't remember. And she was, born and raised in England, and she was like, I'm actually really grateful for the British Empire and what they did. And I went, they built all the railroad tracks to go from the center to the coast so that they could loot India. They didn't build railroad tracks so that Indians could use them. And she was like, is that true? British schools are working. All right, I missed the story, but it's an important story. In 1821, another Middle Eastern country does something similar to what Egypt has done. It declares its independence from the Ottoman Empire. It's Greece. Now, I know some of you are thinking, wait a minute, Greece is in the Middle East. Isn't it, though? So here's the test. Take a Greek person, stand them next to an Armenian, a Turk, a Kurd, a Persian, a Syrian, a Palestinian, a Lebanese, and an Egyptian, and have them hold their national dish. All of them, preferably. And then put them next to a Swede, a Norwegian, an Englishman, a German, a Dane, and a Dutch person, and then compare. Is Greece really in Europe? I don't think so. First of all, you can't tell a Greek apart from a Middle Easterner by looking at them. And then when you look at their food, you realize, oh, they're definitely from the Middle East. So that conversation is now over. We can move on. So, Greece declares its independence in 1821. It will fight an 8-year-long, brutal, bloody war to break away. It gets crazy help from the French and the British, the Russians. All these Europeans send them everything they can to support them. They would have never had a chance without the help. And they finally succeed, and they carve out a little chunk of the Ottoman Empire, and they declare the kingdom of Greece, but, right, puppet master, strings, the Europeans insist that Greece get a Brandenburger, a German king. So, right, Charles III, his father, Prince Philip, was from the Greek royal family. He was 100% German. It's okay, Elizabeth II was also 100% German. Charles III is a German king of England. Saxe Göteborg, I think that's their name. I know it's Windsor now, but everybody knows that's not true. It was just awkward doing World War I and World War II with a German name. It's like, oh, that's weird. What can you do? Laugh. So when William becomes the King of England, he will be the first English King of England in 1,000 years. Because when William the Conqueror took over England in 1066, the Norman, the French-speaking Viking, when he took over England, there hasn't been an English king since. There have been Welsh kings and Scottish kings, Dutch kings and German kings and French kings and Norman kings. Isn't that cool? It's weird that his name is William. You would have thought they would have named him after not the guy that conquered England, but the guy. Anyway, like the guy that lost, that would have been a sucky name. When the Greeks break away, they left 2/3 of the Greeks behind. Greece was 800,000 people. The Ottoman Empire had 1.5 million, 1.6 million, 1.7 million Greeks still. So it wasn't a real liberation in that sense. It was just sort of this weird nationalistic thing. We wanted our own independent state. What ended up happening was, because the Greeks, the ethnic Greeks, had become so inherently intertwined in the Ottoman state, they were bureaucrats, they were merchants, they had these really high positions. The Ottomans went, oh, if you're going to be traders, we're going to teach you a lesson. And they replaced most of the Greeks with Jews and Armenians. And so in a way, the Greeks who got left behind got screwed, and they were 2/3 of the Greek population. And then the Greeks who got their independence really didn't. They just sort of became a puppet state of Western Europe. But that also planted a seed in all the different ethnic groups' minds. Maybe we should go it alone. Maybe we should jettison the Turks once and for all. And it starts to happen in the Balkans. State after state start to break away. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire is going to play a major role in conquering that land from the Ottoman Empire, triggering wars and intervening, eventually capturing Bosnia-Herzegovina, which will trigger World War I. It's a mess. All right. So I got us to the Suez Canal, and then Egypt getting conquered in 1882 by the English. Okay, shortly afterwards, the English end up in a really awkward position. What happened was they had an oil company. It was actually originally an antique dealership that turned into an oil company. Like, I want to know the steps. Look at this sofa. It's 100 years old, or you can have a barrel of oil. That company was called Shell. But in the late 1800s, the Dutch, Royal Dutch was the name of the company, bought Shell, making Royal Dutch Shell. And they took 51% possession of this new Royal Dutch Shell, which meant they had the controlling interest. So even though the British had a fantastic relationship with the Dutch, it meant that they had effectively lost control over oil production. They didn't have their own oil company. There was one other oil company on the planet of any size, and that was Standard Oil that belonged to the United States. Because you got to remember, right, Pennsylvania is where the United States struck oil in 1861, the year the Civil War broke out. Bad timing. And so, in a really weird way, the United States was the original Saudi Arabia. Today, the United States is again the world's Saudi Arabia. Does that mean Saudi Arabia was the U.S. for a while and then lost it to the U.S. again? I think that's right, because the U.S. was the original major oil dealer in the world. Anyway, that's why if you've ever been in the United States and you've bought Quaker Steak oil or Pennzoil, Quaker State is Pennsylvania, Pennzoil as in Pennsylvania, because that's the original oil industry. It's Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana. So the British are panicking because they're doing the math and they've realized oil is going to replace coal. It's just a matter of time. And oil will replace coal powering its ships, and everything the British do is about its navy. So they feel like for profit purposes they need access to the oil, but also to make sure they're keeping up with the resource they need access to the oil. At the time, in the late 1800s, the way you looked for oil is you walked staring at your feet, and you look for black shale or black sandstone because those rocks are porous and it'll suck the oil into them, and then you start digging. Well, the British think the world is really big. It's going to take a long time to just have people walking around the world looking at their feet. Surely there's a better way to do this. And they're English, so that what do? They read books. And they start reading history, and they notice that the Arabs were using oil to light up their streets at night with lamps 1,000 years ago. And so they're like, okay, there must be oil in the Middle East. Let's start there. So they decide to carve Kuwait out of the Ottoman Empire. And then they use Kuwait to start looking for oil in the region. At the same time, they go to the Iranians and they make a deal. So the Iranians were ruled by the Qajars. The Qajars were really addicted to opium. They loved their opium. And of course, the British Empire is the world's first ever drug dealer empire. It was founded on tobacco, but moved up to opium. You know how they talk about, like, if you start doing the soft drugs, you'll get to the British did that. And so the British have invaded Afghanistan 4 times. The 4th time with the United States. But the first 3, when they were the most powerful empire on earth, they were defeated 4 times. Because Afghanistan produced the vast majority of the world's poppy, the world's opium. That's why they kept going in. They needed that opium so they could sell it to China, because China didn't want anything the English made. So if you could hook the Chinese on opium and hook the Qajars on opium, you could make business deals. All you had to do was drug your customers. It's genius. There's even a war called the Opium War. So what happened was the Chinese went, we refused to take your opium anymore, and a bunch of European countries invaded China and shot the place up and said, no, you're going to take our opium. Like, that's a level of vicious. So the Qajars make the world's worst deal. They give the British an 84% concession on any oil they discover. Normally you do 50% because the British found it, the British are going to dig it up, right? The British are going to put the energy into it, but it was your oil, so 50-50. But the Qajars do 84-16. The British are beside themselves with joy. They're like, man, this opium is great. Within years of making the deal, I think they made the deal in 1901, I think by 1905, I think it was in 4 years, the English are walking around Khuzestan, the southwest corner of Iran, the Arab majority part of Iran. Is it just me, or did God just put a bunch of oil underneath Arab feet, even in Iran? Like, what was that about? I'm not going to give you water, but wait, you'll see, except for the Nile and the Euphrates and the Tigris. But that's why Egypt doesn't have oil, right? Because in the last ice age, the ice dropped the ocean levels, so the Nile cut right into Egypt's oil deposits and washed them into the Mediterranean, and then the ocean levels raised back up. It's just bad luck. Oops. But pyramids, so who cares? In 100 years, when we've burnt the last drops of oil, nobody will even remember us, right? Because, well, there won't be writing or anything. Nobody will know how to use computers. It'll be okay. The Earth will survive. We might not, but who cares at the end of the day? Like, what have we ever done for the Earth? What is our mission as a species? Why are we here? To kill each other? To steal from one another? To work hard, eat fatty, sugary, salty foods, and watch TV? I don't know, I feel like we should do something fun. I know everybody wants to go to Mars. I'm on board. Let's do it. Mars would be fantastic. I don't think we have the attention span. And we get distracted by a Kardashian or something. Are they still a thing? I don't pay any attention, so I probably dated myself. Like really, you know what we could do? We could battle global warming. Think about this. Imagine by 1987, we knew 100% global warming was happening. In fact, the oil companies knew earlier. I want to say as early as the late 60s, might have been early 70s, Exxon, before it was ExxonMobil, asked itself a really interesting question. Are we doing something to the Earth with all this petroleum? If you've ever looked at a chart of the temperature rise, and you're looking at it, there's a hump that goes away, and then you get so there's a gentle rise starting 200 years ago, right, because the industrialization usage of coal, and then oil kicks in, and then there's this hump, and then it takes off. That hump's World War II. So if you've ever been one of those people who's like, I don't know, can humans affect the climate? You can see World War II. Isn't that crazy? It blows my mind. For the record, World War II had 3 of the coldest recorded winters in human history. It's one of the reasons why so many soldiers froze to death. And yet, in that 8-year span of time, the average temperature of the planet went up despite the bitter cold winters. It's freaky. So by 1987, by the early 70s, Exxon had done a study. They found out that it was true. We were heating up the planet. And there were a group of Exxon workers, employees, top executives who were like, we have to tell the public. We have to fix this. And then the guys in Exxon who were like, oh no, we'll lose our profit margins, suppressed it. And then Exxon began spending billions of dollars trying to convince the world that it was a hoax. But by 1987, there was no doubt that it was real. I'm not saying don't use petroleum. I'm an oil baby. My parents met working for Aramco. I wouldn't exist if it wasn't for petroleum. My dad's career was geophysics. He looked for oil. That's what he did for a career. I don't hate oil. I'm here. I love oil. I just think we could have been battling global warming at the same time. It's not one or the other. And I think that's where I get confused with Exxon. Those executives who were like, really ought to do something, they weren't going to abandon looking for oil and using oil, but they wanted to do it in a responsible way. Anyway, imagine, since 87, all the wars that we fought, all the nasty things we've done to each other, if we had put that towards fighting global warming. Just the thought. Anyway, so back to our story that I derailed us from. So the British have found this oil in Iran, and they create the I almost gave it the wrong name, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. Today it's called the National Iranian Oil Company. Well, half of it is. The other half is called British Petroleum. This is the birth of British Petroleum and the NIOC. It's twin. So what ends up happening is, in 1905, the Iranians begin the process of trying to create a democratic system. And the British panic because they fear that if the Iranian public knows the details of the deal they signed with the Qatars, that the Iranian people will vote in politicians who will get rid of the deal, and they'll lose their 84% concession. So they go to Iranian clerics, they pay them crazy amounts of money, And they say, will you help us overthrow this pro-democracy movement? The clerics go, absolutely, we hate this idea. And then they go to the Russians and they go, will you invade Iran from the north? We'll come in from the south and we'll put this thing down. And they do. And that's the end of that pro-democracy Iranian movement. So in 1950, fast forward to 1950, when the Shah puts in Mossadegh as the prime minister, Mossadegh, he knew what Mossadegh was going to do. But the Shah Iran wasn't quite where Britain is, where the king is a figurehead and parliament rules, but the king had limited power. So he wants Mossadegh to do this, obviously, because he knows what he's going to do. What he did was he threw out the British embassy, because embassies are where your spies operate out of. So, right, because they have diplomatic immunity. That way they can do the dirty work in your country, and then all you can do is kick them out. So the first thing he does is he shuts down the British embassy, then he nationalizes the oil company and creates the National Iranian Oil Company and kicks the British out. So they didn't end up with a 50-50 concession. They ended up with a 100% concession. They're gone. The British can't overthrow the government. They don't know what to do. So they wait patiently. And then in 1952, Dwight David Eisenhower is running for president as a Republican candidate. And it's obvious to everybody he's going to win. Because even though he's a Republican, there's a bunch of Democrats who are going to vote for him because everybody loved Dwight David Eisenhower. He was that guy. He was humble. He was a sociopath. But he was logical. He was rational. He was the kind of guy that got you victories and admitted his shortcomings. He got up in front of the American public and he said, I don't know economics, I'm a general. I know how to break things. So he said, so I'm going to bring in a professor from an Ivy League school, and every Friday for 1 hour, he's going to teach me economics so that I can make better decisions. Can you imagine being humble, admitting you have limitations to your knowledge? Incredible. At the time, people thought that was great. I know today we would be like, what? You're a loser. How are you so weak? I know everything. I'm always shocked at how strong people hold on to their opinions. It's like, whoa. Well, first of all, how much research did you do? Was it AI-based? I don't know if y'all have noticed, but AI does not understand facts. Don't use AI for facts. You can use it to say, how does this sentence sound? But I wouldn't use it for digging out facts. It is very bad. Like, you could start there, but then look, you need to have this face when you look at their facts. And then immediately go to a reliable source, because 90% of the time AI is wrong. It just makes stuff up because it just wants to please you. It's weird. So, in 1952, the British approach Eisenhower, and they say, we have a problem. We don't know how to get back into Iran to get access to that oil. How do we do this? We need you to overthrow Iran's government. Eisenhower isn't even president yet. It's the election year. He becomes president in 1953. And Eisenhower goes, deal, I'll help you. Don't worry about it. So, in 1953, he launches a CIA operation. The CIA is just a few years old. The CIA was created by a group of Yale graduates. Their goal was to create a spy agency that would do all the dirty work for corporations so that they could have corporate espionage. And, where necessary, if you had an uncooperative leader somewhere in the world, you could just zap him, and then you could buy all the bananas you want for pennies on the dollar. And so what happened was those Yale graduates went to the United States government and said, hey guys, we created the CIA. It's going to operate whether you like it or not. This is a done deal. If you like, we'll let you fund us, and then we'll let you use this as you like. The United States government went, okay. So their first operation was actually in 1949, when they overthrew the 3-year-old Syrian government. Syria got its independence from France in 1946. Al-Quwatli was its first leader in 1949. On a lark, the CIA overthrew Al-Quwatli. By the way, that operative is a musician, and I think one of his sons ended up the drummer for Sting. That's how I remember. I'm trying to remember his name, and it's not popping in. It'll come to me when I'm driving home. I'll be like, oh yeah, I feel like it starts with a C, but it's not coming to me. So 4 years later, the CIA deploys Kermit Roosevelt. Kermit Roosevelt is President Theodore Roosevelt's grandson to Iran with the goal of overthrowing its democracy. Well, it's not really a democracy, it's republic. The prime minister. What the English don't realize, because they do it, they pull it off. I told the story before many times. You can just go to YouTube and see the details. What the English don't realize is what Eisenhower's goals are. So, let's back this up just a little bit. In World War I, the English, the French, sit down, Sykes-Picot. They take out a piece of paper, they whip out some crayons, and they begin carving up the Ottoman Empire like a Thanksgiving Day turkey. Pun intended. And as they're carving up the empire, they give a piece to the Greeks, a piece to the Italians. They're not there. They're not at the table. It's just the French and the British. A piece to the Russians. They're just carving it up. The English are going to get South Iran. The French are going to get Syria and Iraq. The British are going to get Palestine and Jordan. And then the Italians were going to get a piece of what is today southern Turkey, and the Greeks were going to get the Izmir area, the west coast of Turkey, and the Russians were going to get Constantinopolis, Constantinia. Well, the Russians have a communist revolution and say that and the Russians are going to get northern Iran too, I forgot that. So the Russians have a communist revolution and they reject imperialism and they're with the people, workers' power, hammer and sickle all the way, and they're not going to do it. So the British realize they're not going to get southern Iran, so they tell the French, sorry, we're taking Iraq because we know Iraq has oil. Since we didn't get southern Iran, you're losing Iraq. And that's how the map got drawn that is the map today, right? The borders in the Middle East are the borders that Europeans with crayons and napkins drew and then superimposed. Same with the borders in Africa. Now in Africa, the goal was always divide and conquer. So for example, the Hausa, the French got the northern Hausa and put them in Niger. The English got the southern Hausa and put them in Nigeria, right? That's the goal. Cut every nation in half and then give it to your rival, give the other half to your rival, and then go from there. That way, Nigeria is this multi-ethnic state where every ethnicity has somebody in another state so that nobody can work together, so that the British could rule forever. In the Middle East, that's hard to do when Arabs go from Morocco to Iraq. How do you do that? But they figured out a way, right? And they put in these random arbitrary borders. For the record, they almost didn't pull it off. Faisal from Hejaz made a kingdom that was the western part of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Palestine, and Syria, and its capital was Damascus. He made a kingdom. Its flag is almost the Palestinian or Jordanian flag. Two of the colors are flipped. I forget which ones. So instead of it being black, white, green, I think the black is touching the green. Anyway, he eventually gets overthrown by the French. In 1920, the French attack Syria. At the Battle of Maysalun, the Arabs are defeated. The French brought in tanks and airplanes. The Arabs were doing cavalry charges into the French and just couldn't pull it off. And then the British go to Faisal and they say, hey, we hear you're unemployed. And he's like, yeah, do you want to be king of Iraq and rule it as our puppets? And he goes, sure. And that's how the Hashemis ended up with Iraq, and then he gave Jordan to a relative, and then allowed the Saudis to take the Hejaz Mountains and create the third Saudi state. That was the deal that was made. So, one more important story to sort of set this before I tell you Eisenhower's goals. And then I think we're running out of time, so we're probably out of time, I'm not sure. I've lost track. But I'll wrap it up, because I can tell some of you are getting antsy. It's getting too close. It's nearing 71, and then 48, 67. It's all these really ugly years. 71 wasn't ugly, but the other two were. But then there's 2000s. That wasn't that bad. Oh, then there was 2001. That was it. It's like, oh, so close. Oh, well. Easy come, easy go. I feel like it should be hard come, hard go, because I don't feel like any of this was easy. So, the Germans, it's World War II. German military, look, I'm part German, so I probably shouldn't say stuff like this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It was an amazing machine. 70 million people decided to take on, with the help of the Japanese, they were 100 million. So 170 million people decided to take on 2 billion people. You just do the math, you're like, are you guys okay? You might be idiots. And it took 8 years for the 2 billion people to put down the 170 million people. That's impressive, because you would have thought it would have been a lot quicker. So how did that happen? Well, the Germans had a decent military machine. Now, fortunately, I never know how to say this. Their leader was an idiot. I know everybody's like, he's so smart. No, every decision he made was wrong. He's the primary reason the Germans lose. First, by starting the wars, which was stupid to begin with, but then second, by making one horrible decision after another. So I'm grateful for that, because obviously we wanted them to lose, but the irony is if he wasn't there, they wouldn't have done any of the crazy to begin with. So it's confusing. The war is winding down. The Russians have been tearing them to pieces, and the United States has been tickling them on the side, right? A little tickle in Italy and a little tickle in France. And the Russians it's an onslaught, just because the Russians are a massive military machine. Everybody's forgotten that and think that World War II started and ended at Normandy. But the reality is World War II in Europe was Russia versus Germany, and in the Pacific was the United States versus Japan. In any case, the Germans are done. It's December 44. They're literally going to surrender in 5 months. They know they're finished. A rational human being would just go, why don't we surrender now? But they're way past rational at this point. We're way past rational. I never know how to phrase these things. So they decide to do an offensive. One giant last hurrah. They take all their best equipment off of the Russian front. That's where all their best equipment was, because they were using their second, third line equipment and soldiers to fight the United States and France. They had all their best stuff, their best units, their strongest SS units, their best tanks on the Russian front. They pulled them off, stuck them on trains. By that point, Germany was really small, the territory, so it was really quick to move to the other front. And they tried to punch a hole through the British and American lines. Their goal was to get to the English Channel and trap the British and American soldiers in the Netherlands, surround them, and then cut them down. The German idea was they would then surrender to the British and the Americans, because the British and Americans would want to make peace, because the pain of losing all those troops in the Netherlands was so bad that they would accept a German surrender. And then, hopefully, the British and the Americans would join them and fight the Soviets together. That's how delusional the Nazis had become. They had just lost their mind. From the very beginning, they had already lost it. But it's even worse now. It's like lost times 2. They punched this hole, And the American units in Belgium disintegrate. There's one airborne unit in Bastogne that holds out, but everything around it just melts. And the Wehrmacht is going straight to the English Channel. There's nothing the Allies can do to stop them. And then the Germans ran out of gasoline. Best tanks on the planet, useless. 2 weeks, they were done. They didn't make it. They made a bulge in the lines, so we call it the Battle of the Bulge. But they ran out of gas. Oops. Within days of the German defeat, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the President of the United States, is on a ship in the Suez Canal. That's January 1945, meeting with the King of Saudi Arabia. And they make a deal. And the deal is going to center the United States in the oil industry and create Aramco. And it's going to link the United States and Saudi Arabia together in this really tight bond. Like, good luck breaking this alliance. I know the Saudis are very confused right now, not sure which direction is what, but that alliance has gone through a lot, and it's strong. Now, here's the twist. What Roosevelt told the Saudis was, we've already figured out you guys have a lot of oil. You're going to be the new United States in the future. We want to make sure we're never that German army. You need to keep the oil flowing. As long as you do, we'll be best friends forever. And of course, that's been the relationship. So in 1953, just 8 years later, when the CIA overthrows Mossadegh, what the English don't realize is Eisenhower isn't thinking, how do I restore Iran to the English sphere of influence? He's thinking, how do I dismantle the British and French empires and replace them? Eisenhower doesn't care about communism. I mean, he does, but it's like third on his list. He had 3 things he was interested in fighting. Communism, third on his list. Number 1 was destroying the British and French empires and replacing them. Isn't that cool? It changes how you think about the United States a little bit, doesn't it? Because you're like, wait, weren't they like best friends in World War II? This is 8 years later. And that's why Iran got the nickname Little America, because Iran now ends up inside the US sphere of influence instead of the British sphere of influence. Number 2. All right, so in 1919, activists from Ireland, India, and Egypt got together. And their goal was to break out of the British Empire. And what they came up with was, if the 3 countries go into uprising at the same exact moment, there's no way the British can keep all 3. They'll lose at least 1. If they're lucky, they'll lose 2. It's unlikely they'll lose all 3, because what they'll probably do is prioritize. The amazing thing about this is the Indians know they'll prioritize India. So they're willing to do this uprising, knowing the odds are stacked against them succeeding in getting their independence, on the off chance it'll help Egypt and Ireland break away, and maybe down the road pave the way for Indian independence. That's what they're thinking. And the Irish and the Egyptians are like, all right, let's go. So in Medan Tahrir, in Cairo, the Egyptians go into full rebellion. Ireland and India go into full rebellion. By the way, the British come in with tanks into Medan Tahrir, and the Egyptians fight back. Like, I don't remember the casualties, but it's something like 700 dead English by the time this is done. So it wasn't a one-sided slaughter because the Egyptians are fighting back. And in the end, in 1920, the English go, all right, Ireland, all right, Egypt, we're going to let you go. And they kept India until 1947. Well, but in Ireland and Egypt's case, with a catch. And even in India's case, right? In India's case, you can't go as a single state. We have to break you and artificially divide you against yourself so that you can fight multiple wars in the future and waste your resources in this cruel, sadistic little march that serves no purpose other than to hurt Indians. Isn't that cool? The British were so good at this. In the case of Ireland, Northern Ireland stays in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. In the case of Egypt, the Suez Canal stays in the British Empire. In 1919, the core of the Egyptian movement, there were men like Saad Zaghloul, but the core of it, the guys underneath, were the Coptic Orthodox population. And the reason is they believed the only way that the Arab world could be free was to create a pan-Arab state that stretched from Morocco to Iraq. Those activists in 1919 weren't just thinking about Egyptian independence, they were thinking some measure of unity, whether it was a confederacy or a federation, something that stretched all the way across. And of course, in 1952, Egypt has its third revolution, right? 1879, 1919, 1952. Egyptians love revolution. Like, name a country that does more revolutions than Egypt. It's like a pastime. A little backgammon, a little revolution, some shay. Iran is competing. I feel like Iran and Egypt are like, oh, I think we can be first. I mean, even the French are having a hard time keeping up. So, I derailed myself with I have to try to remember where I was. 1952, Egypt has this revolution. Nasser ends up in power. What's Nasser's message? We're going to unify the Arab world. That's the second thing. Eisenhower's goal is to make sure that the Arab world never unifies under any circumstance. So in 1958, Egypt and Syria merge, create the United Arab Republic. Iraq's in the middle of a revolution where they're eventually going to drag their king through the streets and kill him. Iraq announces it wants to join on the other side of the revolution. It's going to join the United Arab Republic and adopts a flag. And then Lebanon is in the middle of an uprising where it looks like the pro-Nasser guys have a strong chance of winning in Lebanon. So there might end up being 4 Arab states merging together in a United Arab Republic. And now there's even talk of Yemen jumping in. 1958 is a really exciting year. So Eisenhower invades Lebanon and threatens to nuke Baghdad. Did you all know that? The United States told Baghdad, we will nuke you, and invaded Lebanon. And the goal was to make sure that no United Arab state could possibly work. To be fair, Nasser does a good job of messing up his relationship with Syria. He treats the Syrians like a colony and ruins the relationship, and so the Syrian military does a coup d'etat in 1961 and overthrows him, and Syria breaks out. So the experiment lasted 3 years. Officially, on paper, Yemen does join the United Arab States, which was meant to be a confederacy, not a unification. But of course, everything unravels in 1967 for Egypt, and so that's the end of it, right? Because Egypt sort of got spayed and neutered in 1967. Well, there was an attempt to spay and neuter it. In 1973, it comes back and shows the world it's still got a punch. The point in bringing all this together was I was hoping I would give you a little bit of a sense on how we got to this moment without getting too close to this moment, just so you could see the groundwork for the pieces, right? As the Ottoman Empire comes apart, the Italians grab Libya, the British grab Egypt, the French grab Tunisia and Algeria, And then eventually, after World War I, as the Ottoman Empire experiences an Arab uprising, the French and the British use the Arab uprising to take out Syria, Palestine, and Iraq. And then the pieces that Eisenhower introduces, of course, take us one step further. In other words, we're not here in this moment, in this room, without having had a long history to get us here. I mean, when you think about it, right, there are elements that go back to the 7th century. This isn't just something that happened. It's something that's taken a process to get here. Here's where I get stuck. So obviously I spend a lot of time sinking myself into history. I don't know why. I'm clearly obsessed. I probably have mental illness problems. I admit it, especially when you look at how much research I did on World War II. Like, there's definitely something wrong with me. I'll just say that off the top of my head, like it's without being a psychiatrist. Psychologist. Psychiatrists are drug dealers, psychologists heal people. I have a psychiatrist, I love her dearly. But it's still a fact. That doesn't change the fact that that's the truth. So what I get stuck on is, I'm not sure why we have to keep repeating this thing. I know history repeats itself, it's cliche and stupid and boring, but it seems really weird that we're clearly stuck in this loop. It's almost like every generation has amnesia and forgets what the previous generation learned. And I don't know how we can stop that cycle. I feel like all you'd have to do is, not just educate politicians, but educate the masses so that the masses can get on board. But then, if the masses have too much information, it's a threat to the state, right? That's the attitude most states have anyway. And so I feel like there's this really weird thing that we're stuck in. And right now, the brunt of that is in the Middle East. Arabs are 6% of the world's population, but they're 50% of the world's refugees. We are right now in the world's worst ever refugee crisis. It's actually getting better a little bit, but I don't know that that's going to continue, right? I have a sneaky suspicion that that's going to head back in the other direction. And so, in a way, all the chaos on the planet that's taking place, the Arab world is taking the brunt of it. You can just see it in the refugee population. And it's obviously linked to oil at some level. But there's also more to it than just that, right? Napoleon didn't have to invade Egypt in 1798. Germany was right there. He could have invaded Germany or Italy. In fact, right, he did invade Italy in 1797, and he will invade Germany over and over and over again for the next crazy 17 years. But that invasion of Egypt, when you think about it, required his navy to somehow survive the British fleet. Low odds. And yet he does this daring, insane thing, and then runs away right away because he realizes, oops, I may have made a mistake here, and then leaves his army behind, because what else is he going to do? His navy's sunk. Why does he take that risk? And one of the things I think we get stuck on, and there's been plenty of psychology done about this, is the extent to which world leaders, business leaders, politicians are rational. And I think in our minds that they are, right? We want them to be. But all the psychology says they're not. Our species doesn't do rationality, we rationalize. We make a decision, and then we sit there and make an argument about why that decision was the right one. But the decision came first. That's irrational. That's not a rational way. We believe a thing, and then we do the research to back up the thing we believe. Instead of going into it with an open mind and saying, I don't know what to believe, let me go do some research, and then you come away after the research. No, that's not what we do. We pick the thing we want to believe, and then we work our way backwards. And then, of course, we tunnel now with their stupid devices into these conspiracy theories, and we pick countries we hate, and we and we focus on this, and we like root for them, like we're rooting for teams in the World Cup, instead of recognizing the humanity in everybody. And I just can't figure it out. It's 2026. How is it we don't know that every single person on the planet has value? I thought we would have figured this out. I thought we figured that out like when the Berlin Wall came down. Did I miss the memo? I was so naive. I was in Germany at the time when the Berlin Wall came down, and like my brain was breaking because I had been through the wall. I had gone to East Germany. And so to think that Germany was going to reunify, I couldn't even comprehend it. I was like, what is this? Oh, wow. If this can happen here, imagine all the other places in the world where the strife and the struggle could, forget about it. Anyway, I hate to leave it on that note, but that's where we are. It's, forget about it. I'm going to go watch Netflix with my family. What are you going to do? Same thing. Play a board game, play video games. Oh, no. So, for the record, there has never been a revolution that's worked. I challenge somebody to find one. To be clear, I want it to be true that there is a revolution that worked. I just can't find one. The Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution started 1,200 years ago in the Arab world, when the Arabs went, if I take a table and start making a product at one end and have workers line up and the finished product is at the other end, all they have to do is work on that part, pick it up, put it there. That was the first factories were made in the Arab world 1,200 years ago. 200 years ago, the British introduced coal power to the factories. And somehow that's the birth of the Industrial Revolution that was already 1,000 years old by that point. Anyway. But you're right, the Industrial Revolution did work. I love it. Like, think of all the amazing things we get out of it. But it wasn't, obviously, a political revolution. All right, thank you. You've been a fantastic audience.